Hey everyone, this is Navin from Harcourt's Greater Springfield. And today we're going to be speaking with Joshua Pavic from Pest Proofing Solutions to find out a bit more about pests at home and a bit more about the services they offer as well. So let's hear from Josh.
Good afternoon, Vin. Thank you for inviting me along this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Josh. A couple of questions. Obviously, we're going to talk a fair bit about pests proofing and on those kind of things. And I guess what I have in mind is we're going to try and start from the outside of the home, and then we're just going to try and work our way up from the floors and the walls and the roofs.
Ground up.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so maybe before we start off, can you please share a bit more about what you do and the services you offer?
Well, at Pest Proofing Solutions, I offer a wide variety of services, as you say, from the ground up, being from subterranean termites on pre-construction and post-construction homes, all the way through to general pest control inside the home and on the outside of the home. Services like rodent baiting services to the roof void and the yards, all the way up to the rooftop, installing proofing measures around the solar panels to exclude ingress of pest birds and also possums and things like that on the rooftop. Coming into winter, also things like trapping of some pests like possums from roof voids and yards that they're not welcome in, and relocation in accordance with the relevant standards.
Okay, so I guess with where we are in South East Queensland, what are some of the common pests that you encounter, at least in the outside of the home?
Probably some of the most common ones are ants, a variety of species like the common black house ant, and the new common ones that we're finding these days like coastal brown ants.
Yep.
And then the general pests as well on the inside and around the home, like the cockroaches. A lot of cockroaches also live in the garden areas and around the yard. I don't really delve into other things like snakes, which a lot of things are in like summer months and stuff like that, but again, most of it's seasonal, so I just chase the pests as they arrive per season.
Yeah, okay. Because snakes aren't considered pests, are they?
Not really, no.
Just an unwelcome visitor kind of
exactly.
thing. Yeah. With ants, how about fire ants? Because that one, there's a bit of a government initiative about fire ants. Is that something you do as well?
Not really. There is a certain accreditation you've got to have to deal with fire ants. Yep. It's not something I've really delved into at the moment. Yep. It is something I can look into and help out with. The common treatments we use and the chemicals I use does help eradicate them, but yep. I'm not necessarily a licensed or accredited technician to deal with them.
Yeah. Okay. And also, I think they're trialing a new way, because they've sent me like 2 bottles of fire ant treatment stuff for free anyway, so I haven't used it. But okay, tell me more about coastal brown ants, and what was the other species of ants you said?
Just the common black ants that everyone's used to seeing around in the house. Yeah. But they've been driven out more and more these days by the coastal brown ants, which are becoming the more common ant.
Okay.
So there are even smaller tan-coloured ant, yep. Renowned in wet areas like kitchen and bathrooms, yep. And I find in particular they love eating the silicon around those wet areas for whatever reason. Yep. So they cause some havoc and nuisance when they start doing that, because they can end up with moisture problems.
Yeah, fair enough, because that was going to be a question, like what's the big deal about having ants? But yeah, okay, so silicon. Are there any other kinds of problems caused by them, I guess?
Well, if they start eating the silicon in the right areas, say for instance around the base of your shower or the bathtub, and that's a regularly used wet area, that moisture can start ingressing down into the voids of the wall, yep. and into the timbers of the wall, leading to decay and mold and all that sort of things, and then that leads to other things like the subterranean termites, because yep. you've got rotten, decayed timber inside the walls.
Tell me a bit more about subterranean termites, and how are they different from, I guess, any other termites?
Well, the subterranean termites, in the sense they come from the ground and work their way up, quite often from a nest outside in the yard. Yep. They're travelling, foraging up to 50 metres from their nest, just looking for their next feed. For whatever reason, like it might be a leak in that bathroom area, they come sniffing that out. Like decayed wood is like chocolate for termites. Yeah, so they sniff that out from up to 50 metres away. They come foraging in, have a bit of a nibble on all that wet decayed timber, and that's why they're there.
Okay, so let's talk a bit more about, again, coming back to the ants that you're talking about. So when you say treatment, what does treatment look like?
Most of the time it's within this situation dealing with the coastal brown ants, it's crack and crevice treatments using things like pyrethrin powders and dusts because they're travelling inside the voids of the walls. So an easy way is to use a powdered product that permeates inside those gaps and crevices, leaving a slight residue in the surface. As the ants are tracking around through there, they pick that up on their little mitts, take it back home to the nesting site, slowly passing it on to everyone along the way, and we get that colony control. Dealing with areas, sensitive areas like maybe a bench top or a countertop in a bathroom or something like that, we've got to be very careful because obviously we don't want to leave much of a residue there. So we might put a sugary or a protein type bait inside a station where the bait is contained and secure, placing that on the countertop, encouraging the ants to feed on that bait and getting control that way.
Generally, from my understanding of my limited knowledge, I should say, it's more of like there's no point trying to spray the ants you see on the surface because it doesn't do anything for the actual colony that's hidden away. Okay.
That's right. You might be just treating what you're seeing there on the surface at the time, but you're not getting the chemical or the active ingredient back to the nesting site. So that's the main aim, that we want to get colony controlled. No matter what pest we're dealing with, most pests, they have colonies, so they live in families. So we don't want to just kill one or two of them. We want to eradicate all of them. And then leading into that, we want to prevent them from coming back. So we're installing systems as well to then prevent them from coming back into the home.
How would you know when the situation's bad enough to have to contact someone like yourself to come in to deal with the problem, and it's not just a few ants running around?
When you're regularly seeing the pest, and if you're spot spraying them, as you say, and they keep coming back or they're popping up in other areas, that's probably a good indication that you've got a bigger underlying problem with a nest somewhere inside the house.
Let's move into the home and I guess into the, like say, the floors, carpets and things like that, and what are some common types of pests you encounter?
Inside the home, much the same. With carpeted areas, like you mentioned, though, we encounter things like fleas and mites and things because of the pets and other things that people introduce into their homes. Once they get into the fabrics and the pores of things like that, they're very hard to get rid of. So again, it's the specialist treatment to target the specific pests that we're dealing with, treatment accordingly so we can get the control over those specific pests that we're dealing with. So it's asking the right questions to the customer when they're ringing up with their initial bookings and inquiries to know exactly what we're dealing with and what treatment we need to provide for them to get that control that they're looking for.
And with treating fleas and things like that, is it similar in the sense that you're trying to get them into the nest or something like that, or is it different?
No, it's different in the sense that where the fleas harbour and infest is different to, say, the ants and the cockroaches. So the ants and the cockroaches, as we were talking about, hide in the cavities of the walls and stuff like that. So we're using a completely different treatment to what we would for treating fleas because they're harbouring in maybe the carpets and the bedding and the couches. So it's a little bit different in the way we're treating. Again, we don't want to go spraying wet pesticide over your furnishings and stuff like that. But the carpets, we can do things like that with a light misting. So generally, when we're treating internal areas for something like a flea infestation, we're not only just treating around the perimeter edges of the house, but we're spraying the whole carpeted areas, paying particular attention to the cooler, darker, shaded areas, because that's where the pests are going to tend to congregate.
Okay, so we'll move on to, I guess, the walls of homes, and in my industry, obviously, one of the biggest concerns of termites. So termites and any other pests you encounter within, I guess, the walls of your home, what are some measures we can take to, I guess, mitigate having those pests?
Well, whether it be pre-construction or during construction or post-construction of the home, there is lots of different measures that can be put in place to prevent pest ingress into the home, whether it be for, as we say, subterranean termites, general pests, rodents, birds on the rooftop, all those sorts of things. So starting from the ground up, termite prevention is something that can be installed during the construction of the home. So there's lots of different systems on the market that are installed by just about every other pest control company. I personally have my accreditation for about 4 different products I can install during construction of homes for prevention of subterranean termites. And then post-construction, I've got my accreditation for several different chemical applications where I can install chemical treatments around homes, and also baiting and monitoring stations for monitoring pest ingress around the home. So there's lots of different things we can do to help prevent pest ingress from the early stages right up to the post-construction stages. The treatments look very different depending on the style of construction and the age of the property.
Okay, so can you give me an example in terms of, you say the treatment looks very different. So let's say a Queenslander home versus one of the newer homes in, say, the Springfield region. How would the treatment differ?
Well, let's say a slab on ground home. In more modern homes these days, brick veneer. What we would be doing is installing a physical termite management system during the different stages of the build. So we generally attend the site during the concrete pour stage to put some protection around these surface penetrations. We then attend several days later before they start the framing of the house to install some product under the framing. We then come back again a third time when they're doing the brickwork stage to then set that product into the brickwork. We then come back a fourth time when they're doing any concreting or work around the outside landscaping to make sure that that system isn't being bridged or breached in any way and it's still in compliance. And then finally coming back right at the end to provide the homeowner with a handover pack so they know exactly what was done during construction, what to expect, their obligations and things like that going forward, so they know exactly what needs to be done.
Okay. How's that different from, I guess, with a traditional Queenslander?
With a Queenslander home that might be, say, 2 metres off the ground on telecom poles, it's very uncommon these days that they're building homes like that still. But for instance, the existing homes, they would be more than likely have an ant cap around the top of that timber post. And what we could look at doing is installing a chemical treatment around each one of those poles. So as any termites are trying to infest those poles and come up into the home, whether it be a timber pole, concrete post, stump, or a steel post, by installing that chemical treatment around it, it helps prevent termites travelling through that soil into the entry point into the home and then up into the home itself.
Okay, so do termites are not airborne at all?
They are, but they're generally a completely different species.
And they don't cause that kind of damage, do we?
They can, but it takes a lot longer. So subterranean termites are very active, move very quickly, cause a lot of damage quite quickly, dependent on the species. The subterranean ones do spawn or swarm and fly at certain times of the year, but they have to land in the ideal conditions to start their own colony, which generally won't be in your house. It would be in your yard, in the garden. On the other hand, the other type of termites that you might be dealing with, which I've actually got an active site at the moment, is a drywood termite. So a customer I'm dealing with at the moment has had an infestation of drywood termites where they've flown into the house, walked in, infested a piece of timber, and basically they are now living inside pieces of timber and they have everything they need there. They don't need ground contact, they don't need any further moisture. They're basically just living inside the pieces of timber in the home. Until we can get back there and isolate the feeding zone and eradicate the termites, it's a very sensitive site.
It sounds like a horror movie.
It's a little bit.
Okay. And before we'll come to questions like building and pests, we'll try and finish up with, I guess, roof and the top structures of a home. So are there any different types of pests you encounter at the top?
Most common these days that I'm dealing with and helping out with is pigeons on rooftops. More and more homes these days, with the power prices going up, are installing solar panels on the rooftop, whether it be half a dozen panels to up to 40, 50 panels on rooftops, really big systems. Once the pigeons find their way underneath there and make it their cosy home, they basically tell all their friends about it, and they all start flocking there and doing their thing, and it just multiplies, and the issue just gets worse and worse, and it leads to big issues, not only health issues, but degrades the effectiveness of that system. That's where I then come in and clean up the area and install proofing measures around the outside.
Okay, so you're saying the pigeons hide under the solar panels?
Yes.
They can squeeze through?
They can, because generally the solar panels are just high enough, about 100 millimetres off the rooftop, to allow a breeze gap underneath.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
just enough room for the pigeons to squeeze underneath and make it their cosy house.
Yeah, okay. And how does proofing the solar panels look like?
It's installing a specialist mesh around the outside with special clips that go underneath the solar panels, so we don't use any screws or anything like that, causing no damage to the panels themselves or the rooftop, no harsh fixings. So just installing a PVC coated mesh around the panels themselves to exclude the pest from getting underneath.
Okay. And how about things like possums? Is that something you encounter quite often?
Yes, actually went to a site only just today where there was possums underneath the solar panels as well.
Okay.
So that's again something we help out with trapping the possums first and doing the relocation, and then quickly installing the proofing measures so the possums can't come back. So they're generally ingressing either a telecom line or vegetation around the house. So in this particular site I visited today, we're going to trap the possum, quickly put in some proofing measures in place on the telecom line and remove a limb of vegetation. So when that possum's then released in the local area, it's not going to be able to then ingress back onto that rooftop.
Yeah, okay. Moving away from the different types of pests we encounter, tell me what happens during building a pest.
Yeah, so my focus, my background is obviously the pest side of things. So I focus on the timber pest inspection side of things. And then I've got several building inspectors across Brisbane area that I work closely with. And I then can organise the building inspector at the same time. We both then focus on our individual fields, providing the client with individual reports, so then they can make their own informed decision.
Okay, so for someone who has never gone through that process of building a pest, what does it look like? What are you, the building inspector, and yourself, what are you actually looking for? And what can the report look like?
So basically from the initial inquiry, we'll walk the client through what to expect, sending them out firstly an agreement for the service so they know exactly what's going to be provided, the cost that's going to be involved. We generally ask for payment prior to the service, so on the day of the inspection there's going to be no delay sending the client that report, because in most cases it's a very time sensitive situation. So I aim to have the reports out to them, if not by the time I've left the site, very shortly thereafter, so the client can again make their own informed decision. So then once we've scheduled the service, we then organise as well on the building inspection side of things with the other inspector. We aim to be there at the same time. Whether the client be there with us, we can walk them through our findings, or we can provide them with a comprehensive report that's sent to them via email, and then we can correspond over the phone or via email with our findings, our recommendations. If a treatment or a management system is recommended, that is something I can provide whilst I'm on site, as I'm also licensed to treat and install those management systems, where some other inspectors might not be. Some inspectors might only be licensed to inspect, not to treat.
Okay, so how do the reports differ for some of your modern slap-down homes versus the traditional Queenslander homes?
Well, some of the more modern homes obviously are going to have management systems in place. So it's going to be somewhat of a relatively easy inspection for us, just making sure that that system hasn't been bridged or breached in any way to compromise the system, making sure it's still in warranty, that regular inspections are being conducted, and that when the new homeowner or the prospective client moves into this home, that system can be maintained and the warranty can be maintained. As opposed to on the other end of the spectrum, say a more established home, whether it be 20, 30, 50 years old, it may not have a management system in place. If the current homeowner doesn't decide to put one in place before it goes to sale, this is something that's generally going to be picked up by an inspector during the building and pest inspection. And it's going to be one of the first things we recommend as a building and pest inspector, to put a management system in place. So then we've got to provide the prospective buyer with a proposal to install this management system, which gives them reason to negotiate with the seller to either install this system prior to the sale or after the settlement, and they can then ask for this cost to be deducted from the overall sale price. So it gives them room for negotiations.
Okay, so with building and pests, what are, I guess, the three most common issues that you encounter?
Would probably be the lack of a termite management system in some of the more established homes. It would be in a bridge or a breach of the existing termite management system on a modern home. A homeowner might have installed some timber decking against the structure that might be obstructing the existing termite management system. So additional management systems might need to be installed to mitigate the risks of termite infesting those areas. And lastly would be finding active termites on the site, because that might really scare away a prospective buyer.
And finding active termites can be one of the most common issues you're saying?
Yes, because if the homeowner hasn't had a regular inspection, or it's the first inspection on this property, unfortunately we might come across active termites. We've got to not only break it to the prospective buyer, but to the current homeowner. Okay.
How about for people building homes? Okay, for example, we've built recently. How do I know, if I haven't been told, that I actually have a building or a termite management plan?
Well, I would hope that your builder and or the installing company that installed the system would have provided you with a handover pack, much like we do during the construction. We provide this to the homeowner, so they know exactly what was done during the construction of their home, their obligations, and what needs to happen year after year.
So on your website you have a really nice fancy diagram that says integrated pest management. What does that look like?
Depending on the circumstances, whether it be residential or commercial, it might be things like we spoke about from the ground up, installing measures from during construction to during the landscaping and post-construction to firstly monitor for pests coming onto the site, prevent them from coming into the home, control them once they do, and then further monitor them once they're in the home. So there's lots of different measures we can put in place at different stages to create an integrated pest management system on not only homes but commercial properties, shops, pubs, clubs, schools. We treat just about everything.
Pest proofing aside, as a homeowner, what are 3 things we can do to try and manage or prevent pests from entering our homes?
I would say regular monitoring, installing measures to prevent pests from ingressing your home, and then once you notice pests ingress into the home, dealing with it quickly and accordingly, whether it be via spot treatments yourself after educated advice from a professional, or calling a professional for their treatment.
Things like clutter and all that add to potentially more pests?
Yes, so most pests are seasonal and or introduced or come because of conditions around the home.
And when you say conditions, what are some conditions that allow for that to happen?
Depending on the pest, as you say, it might be clutter around the home that might provide a nice, warm, cosy nesting site for things like rodents. Also, things like ants and stuff love to nest and harbour within certain things around the outside of the home, also on the inside. So it always pays to keep a nice, clean, tidy home, that so one thing's uninterested to come and infest it, and or once they do, you notice it quite quickly.
How about store-bought products that you can get from Bunnings and those pesticides, pest sprays and all that? How do you advise using them, and how do we use them?
Don't get me wrong, most of the products you can buy from Bunnings or online pest control stores are very similar to what I carry in the truck and I use in day to day. But it's having the knowledge and the skill on how to use it, where to use it and when to use it. Anybody can buy these products and use them in their own home. The products I use are readily available, and homeowners are welcome to use them on their own home. You don't need a license to use pesticides on your own home. You only need a license to use them on others. And the reason for that is because we have the professional knowledge and skills to use them properly. So it's completely at the homeowner's discretion whether they try and do it themselves or they call a professional to have it done professionally.
What are some, some of the risks involved in doing it on your own?
Misuse of the pesticides, cross-contamination, treating non-target pests, poisoning yourself or others, all sorts of things. You really have to do your research and education prior to using the product. Really reading the label isn't good enough, because there's not enough advice on a small label of a pesticide bottle.
Okay, one question that annoys the heck out of me, and I'm pretty sure most Queenslanders during summer as well, is the bloody flies. How do you get rid of them? Because nothing I seem to get works, and the only thing that seems to work is that stinky sachet from Bunnings. What's the solution?
Again, a seasonal pest and a big nuisance. Like most things, they are quite hard to control, being a flying insect.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I find the most effective things, as you mentioned, are the big smelly pots you buy from Bunnings. You hang a couple of those around the house, in particular maybe around the garbage bin or the pet food bowls or the backyard, where you find those flies like to congregate, and the flies like to flock to those smelly things as opposed to inside your house around your nice roast lunch.
Okay. Damn it, I was hoping for a different answer, but anyway. Okay, what is one thing that you hate most about, I guess, pest control, or one pest that you hate most?
One thing I probably hate most is probably some of the risky and dirty situations I put myself in. That's part of the industry, all part of the job. But then again, on the other hand, I love seeing the rewards that I can provide my customers with the service that I provide, and the guarantee. One pest I hate working with, or more rather hate encountering, would be probably snakes. Especially more so, I either encounter them underneath a house in the old western suburbs in subfloor areas, or up in a roof void. And obviously that's probably one of the worst case you'd want to encounter one of these things, because you don't have far to go and you can't move quick enough. I've only encountered them a few times over the years. Not that they'd be considered a pest, but probably pest-wise, I'd probably say one of my biggest peeves would be dealing with German cockroaches. Because just of the way they infest homes and how hard they are to eradicate, it's very hard to kind of explain to a client how hard it can be, and the need for several treatments every 2 to 4 weeks to really break the life cycle. So I find that a really hard pest to treat and hard to tackle with a homeowner.
How are German cockroaches different from your regular cockroach?
Well, the German cockroaches tend to harbour inside the wet areas of the home, and once an infestation occurs, it multiplies very quickly, and generally by the time the homeowner notices and we get the call, it's hard to deal with, as opposed to dealing with other cockroaches that generally are fly-in, so you might only get 1 or 2. Homeowner notices them quite quickly, and they generally don't survive too long inside the home because it's not a real cosy harbourage point for them. It's not somewhere they'd like to harbour. So we tend to find the bigger cockroaches are something quite easy to deal with. The small German cockroaches are something quite hard to deal with.
And do they fly as well, the German cockroach?
Not really, no. They're just a small crawling cockroach generally.
Okay, so with building a pest, how long does it generally take for you to complete, I guess, the inspection? And is that something you'd rather try and book in early in the day just because it's time sensitive to get the report out?
So building and pest inspections, I personally generally allow 2 hours for the inspection on site. I tend to make it a high priority job type for ourselves because it is time sensitive. Generally the prospective buyer only has 7 days to get the inspection done. So I make all means necessary to adjust my schedule to book the job in as soon as possible, whether it be early in the morning or late in the afternoon, and then organising that inspection with the selling agent and the owner of the property as well, if it's currently tenanted.
Do you have a story you can share where you felt was probably the most interesting, let's say, experience you've had while dealing with pests?
Probably one job that's always stuck out with me, and when people ask this question that I like to tell them about, is a little old lady's house I went to one day when I was working for a multinational company, and she had a big infestation of termites that had recently been dealt with, and we'd come to install a termite management system, not only around the external perimeter of her home, but around the whole internal perimeter of her home as well. And the whole day while we were doing the job, she was basically sitting at the dining room table just reading her newspapers and whatnot with the earmuffs on inside the house, because we were drilling throughout the house, dust going everywhere. And the severity of the infestation in this house was so bad that when you looked at the walls and the trusses up in the roof, you wondered how it was still standing, and really why she was bothering to spend the money to install this system. But then when you heard her story and, the fact that she had no money, nowhere to go, nothing that she could do, that's basically the house she needed to live in until she passed away. We all felt so sorry for her. The management system was actually being installed free of charge.
Yeah, okay.
So it was just one of those situations where it was like dumbfounding how bad the situation was, that you could basically put your hands through the walls and just crumple these timbers with your hands, wondering how the house was still standing.
And how does the termite management system help in a situation like that?
Well, it's basically just risk prevention, stopping it from getting any worse.
Yeah, okay.
The termites were so active there that there was colonies inside the home, inside the yard,
Yep.
that once control was kind of gained by treating the internal timbers, we needed to also treat all the soils around the foundations of the home. So as the termites were coming and going back to the nesting sites and down to the ground for their moisture, that's when we were gaining the full control of the pest.
Yeah, wow. That's a bit of...
I'm
trying to imagine that. Yeah, I can't imagine. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, Josh. I just want to say you have an impressive record of 5-star Google reviews. So obviously it goes to show the kind of service you offer and the attention to detail you offer through your business as well. I really appreciate you taking your time to do this interview today, and I wish you all the very best.
Likewise, Navin, I thank you for your time as well, and for offering to prepare this video together. Always a pleasure. And if there's ever any help or advice I can offer, please feel free to ask.
Most definitely. Thank you.
My pleasure.